We know this for a long time. A retaliatory conflict, a culture conflict, a sovereignty conflict, and a Brexit conflict. And the pressure to change is enormous. And pyres burn, analogies are made with Ukraine, and needed action by the EU. That's about Northern Ireland. And it's been hot again in Northern Ireland for a week, not necessarily from the politicians in this area who traditionally fight each other there. Rather, it has to do with the thorny issue of the extent to which Northern Ireland should belong to Great Britain. The conflict is a retaliatory conflict, a culture conflict and a sovereignty conflict, a colonial conflict and a Brexit conflict, but also a border conflict, a sectarian conflict, an economic conflict, a Britain conflict, and last but not least, an Irish-Irish conflict. And there were reports about pyres where a ship and a flag were burned by Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar last Saturday, and it's about the 333rd anniversary of the Battle of the River of Boyne, the most powerful symbol of England's oppression of Ireland. Hundreds of pyres are burned in Northern Ireland on the night of July 11th each year, and traditionally the ritual serves to give radical forces in the country the opportunity to express their displeasure, similar to the appeasement of hooligans by tolerating their homophobic actions here in German football stadiums. And this Northern Irish resentment is directed against Catholics, against economic hardship in general, against the new rules of modern cultural policy such as same-sex marriage in Southern Ireland or in the rest of Ireland, against the whole reunification of Northern Ireland with the Republic of Ireland in general, and more recently against immigrants, such as the large Polish immigrant community. The disgruntled are also in favor of Northern Ireland remaining in the UK, which is largely due to the billions in subsidy money Northern Ireland receives from London every year. Only recently, London reaffirmed 1.1 million Northern Irish that Northern Ireland would remain in the United Kingdom. The pressure to change the situation is enormous. In the Republic of Ireland, a majority of the population is in favor of Irish reunification, as is the proportion of those in favor of reunification in Northern Ireland. In the highly polarized Parliament of Northern Ireland, the Catholic-born Sinn Féin party now has the most votes, and Sinn Féin, the political arm of the Irish Republican Army at the time, wants reunification, even if it doesn't always say so. And a reunification of both parts of Ireland is theoretically possible in two ways. Either smaller Northern Ireland would be incorporated into larger Ireland, that is the widely debated version, or Southern Ireland, which I have to call it to make it more clear, would be incorporated in the UK along with Northern Ireland, which nobody believes would happen, because the latter is an unthinkable version, since civil war would flare up again immediately. The thinking game makes it clear who is putting the pressure on. If Britain lost its territory of Northern Ireland, it would no longer be the United Kingdom. With secession efforts in Scotland and in various countries of allied Commonwealth states, London's influence crumbled. Almost exactly 100 years ago, after the Irish won their independence from the British Crown in a short and violent war, the British had to let go of 26 out of 32 counties. And Ireland has enjoyed self-government since 1922, while Northern Ireland is remotely controlled from London. Whenever the Belfast Regional Parliament is down, Westminster steps in and takes over. And just like 333 years ago, when King William III sailed to Ireland to clean up there, his allies used beacons to guide his troops. On July 12th each year, one day after July 11th of the Great Fires, a 5-digit number of Brotherhood members marched through around 20 cities to celebrate the victorious battle of the English King William III and commemorate that. Most of the marches are organized in one of the more than 1,000 loyal Orange Lodges. The Brotherhood wear the color orange because the victorious general of the Battle of the Boyne, Willem or William, came from the house of Oranje-Nassau. Long before 1619, England let Ireland know who was in charge. Resentment runs deep because old wounds hardly have time to heal. And for example, 4 years ago, when the Easter Rising of 1916 was to be commemorated at a demonstration in the symbolic city of Derry, Police officers checked the demonstration participants for weapons and ammunition. Shots were fired, which incidentally killed journalist Lyra McKee. The Irish and Northern Irish are reluctant to be disarmed, and paramilitaries are widespread in Ireland. A popular ballad sings, "Behind Ireland, embittered and militant, Ireland is poetic, passionate, commemorative, idyllic, imaginative, and always patriotic." That's just the way it is, and it's very evident in the conflict between Ireland and England. An analogy is the internal freedom struggle of Ukraine against Russia. Many Irish people are currently feeling very strongly for Ukrainians. After all, they have a big neighbor just like them. It's very rare for anyone holidaying in Britain today to see Irish motor vehicle plates. Irish people generally avoid visiting neighboring Britain unless they work there. In general, work and money are Ireland's traditional main problems. Similar to the Middle East conflicts, religion is only put forward when it comes to typical Irish conflicts. Fewer and fewer people on the island of Ireland are truly religious. Anyone who asks people in Belfast or Derry why they want to stay in the UK, that means why they are against reunification, often hears answers like that they don't want to have to pay €80 every time they go to the doctor, as it is in the rest of Ireland. In the Brexit vote, a majority in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union. The clause in the Brexit agreement called Protocol on Ireland-Northern Ireland was also evaluated by the Northern Irish under the premise of whether it would bring them more advantages or disadvantages. The same applies to the more recent Windsor Agreement from this year, which aimed to improve the Northern Ireland Protocol. The border aspect was important. The Good Friday Agreement and Protocol made the 500-kilometer border invisible. The only land border that existed in the UK disappeared, and with it the customs checks. And power is to politicians what money is to voters. The latter is lurking in Northern Ireland, perhaps even more so than anywhere else, in the fear of losing power. Consider the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP. In London, their representatives sit in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And in the Northern Irish Parliament, they are currently the second largest group. The DUP sees itself as the most important mouthpiece for resolving the conflict situations described earlier in this video. And when port checks were introduced along Irish coasts following the introduction of the Northern Ireland Protocol, paperwork grew and several major UK retailers halted deliveries to Northern Ireland. As a result, the first supermarket shelves emptied at times, which led to violent protests. The DUP recognized the consequence. Northern Ireland was suddenly cut off from mainland Great Britain, and that probably explains the burning of a ship on the bonfire. The DUP sees itself as a protective warning against the salami tactical degradation of Northern Ireland's special status. The DUP felt betrayed by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The EU and also Ireland play their own role in this way of looking at the world, and that in turn should explain the burning of the Irish Prime Minister's picture. Incidentally, the police are investigating the burning of the image as a hate crime. And meanwhile, various paramilitaries have announced that they will withdraw from the Good Friday Agreement. The broad-based resumption of weapons is conceivable. In April, US President Joe Biden, of Irish descent, as we know, traveled to Northern Ireland and Ireland to save the Good Friday Agreement. And so, flags were again waved in Belfast and other 17 cities last Wednesday, with inscriptions such as West Belfast, Duke of Manchester's Invincible, or if God be for us, who can be against us? And the mood in downtown Belfast was once again tense, but that's not just the case in Belfast on the 11th and 12th of July. Although Belfast has some fairly nice buildings, it remains a sinister city reminiscent of perpetual civil war. The peace process in Ireland is not a peaceful process. The rifts are deep, the people are unreconciled, and the march seems more emotional than ever. And to be honest, while the DUP is heating that up and by blocking government in Northern Ireland, making everything worse, that will get more difficult. And everyone knows that a majority in Northern Ireland is now for reunification. There is no border poll at the moment, but if there were, I'm absolutely sure that it would end with a majority for reunification. Because the younger generation is more for reunification than against. And I'm not going to the Catholic Protestant stuff again, because that is there. That was always on both sides. But that is something that's always brought up when conflicts escalate again, or when someone needs an excuse for doing what they do. But unfortunately, and that's why we're discussing this a lot of time, it's the easiest way to explain the history and the rift. And so it's sometimes really hard to avoid those terms. But I'm quite sure that we will have to keep an eye on the developments in all of Ireland. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.